There was not a big crowd. There was not a big crowd. As I've said, I've been in elevators with more people. I've been in Ubers with more people than this. She thought she was going to have a big crowd turn out like Catherine in Italy. When you're a real member of the royal family like Princess Catherine and William and King Charles, Camilla, the streets are packed. It's like Michael Jackson came to town. People are throwing roses.
She thought the streets would be lined for her. She thought the world would stop. She thought that by flying to one of the most prestigious cities on the planet, armed with a cause and a designer coat, she would command the kind of reception that real royalty commands. The kind of reception that stops traffic, that fills squares, that brings people out into the cold just for a glimpse. What she got instead was silence. What she got was empty pavement. What she got was the most brutally honest verdict the public has ever delivered on Meghan Markle. Not through protests, not through headlines, but through the simple, devastating act of simply not showing up. And that image of Meghan Markle standing before a scattering of people in Geneva, in a city of nearly 500,000 souls, at an event she presumably expected to crown her as a serious global voice, that image tells you everything you need to know about where things stand right now. Not just for her brand, not just for her marriage, but for the entire elaborate story she has been trying to sell the world since the day she walked away from the royal family. Because here is what makes the Geneva moment so extraordinary. It did not happen in a vacuum. It happened in the same week that photographs appeared on Meghan's social media, strange, carefully composed photographs of her children, taken from behind, faceless, posed on floors and in closets. And when you place those two things side by side, the empty streets of Geneva and the deliberate posting of those children, a picture emerges that is rather difficult to ignore. A picture of a woman who knows, on some level, that the game is changing and who is reaching for the only card she has left to play. Tonight we are going to unpick all of it. The Geneva appearance that was supposed to launch a new chapter and instead exposed just how far the shine has faded. The children photographs that raise questions far more serious than Meghan would like. The Netflix war documentary that has left even her most charitable observers scratching their heads. And the pattern underneath all of it, a pattern that the public, it seems, has finally, irrevocably seen through. Stay with me, because by the time we reach the end of this story, I think you will see it all very differently too. To understand why the Geneva trip landed the way it did, you have to understand the moment Meghan is in right now. This is not a woman at the height of her powers. This is not someone riding a wave of goodwill, building something real, with the world at her feet. This is a woman who launched a lifestyle brand that sent out candles without wicks. A woman whose cookery show received the kind of notices that make publicists reach for the brandy. A woman whose much anticipated podcast venture came and went so quietly that many people genuinely cannot remember what it was called. And now, a woman who flew to Geneva, Switzerland, one of the great international cities, the home of the United Nations, a city with a long and serious relationship with humanitarian causes, and drew a crowd that, by multiple accounts, would not have filled a modest sitting room.
Meghan's podcast has fallen off the charts. She's been criticized for the content. There are rumors that her As Ever launch wasn't as successful as she considered it. Critically, With Love Meghan was not a success.
That is the context. And context matters enormously here, because Meghan Markle has always relied on the gap between perception and reality on the world seeing the version she presents, rather than the version that actually exists. She has relied on the gap between the carefully curated photograph and the unedited truth behind it. She has relied on the gap between the speech she gives and the life she actually lives. And what Geneva did, what those empty streets did, was collapse that gap in a way that even Meghan's most formidable PR machinery cannot fully paper over. This matters to the royal family too, even if they would never say so publicly. Because every time Meghan steps onto a stage and claims a humanitarian mantle, she is, however distantly, however awkwardly, still trading on her connection to one of the world's most respected institutions. She still carries the title of Duchess of Sussex. She still has the letters HRH attached to her name, albeit ones she was specifically instructed not to use. And so when Meghan Markle is publicly humiliated on the world stage, there is no clean separation between her embarrassment and the institution she left behind. The palace knows this, William knows this, and frankly, it is one more reason why those closest to the king grow increasingly weary with every new Meghan misadventure. And yet here is the thing that makes this particular chapter so fascinating to watch. Meghan does not appear to see it, or perhaps, more accurately, Meghan sees it perfectly well and has decided that doubling down is the only option available to her. Because if you look at her behaviour in the days surrounding Geneva, a pattern becomes visible that is quite remarkable in its consistency. The worse things go publicly, the more aggressively she posts her children online. The more her own profile fades, the more she reaches for theirs. And that is not an accident. That is a strategy. A strategy that says everything about where Meghan Markle truly is right now. Let us be precise about what the Geneva trip actually was. Meghan travelled to Switzerland alone, without Prince Harry, who remained at home in Montecito, to speak at the unveiling of a monument honouring children who have lost their lives or suffered as a result of online bullying and cyber harassment. On the face of it, this is an unimpeachable cause. Online safety for children is one of the most urgent issues of our time. Parents across the world are genuinely frightened about what their children encounter on social media, and the need for serious voices and serious advocacy in this space is real and urgent. The event was being staged in conjunction with the World Health Organization, and Meghan arrived as she always does, immaculately presented. The Giorgio Armani coat was noted. The posture was impeccable. The expression was suitably grave and purposeful. Everything about the visual presentation said, "This is a serious person doing serious work." Everything about the visual presentation said, "Here is a woman who commands respect on the international stage." That is what the photographs were supposed to show. That is what the social media posts were supposed to communicate. What they could not hide, and what no amount of careful photography could disguise, was the crowd, or rather, the absence of one. Reports that emerged from Geneva painted a picture that was frankly startling for an event in a major international city, connected to a global health organization, headlined by one of the world's most talked about women. The streets were not lined with well-wishers. There were no crowds pressing forward for a glimpse. There were no scenes reminiscent of the receptions that greet working members of the royal family when they travel overseas. There was, by multiple accounts, a gathering so modest that commentators struggled to describe it without resorting to rather unkind comparisons.
Catherine is over there in Italy, like getting a Princess Diana level reception. Meghan Markle shows up, it's crickets. I think I actually saw a rat scurry across the ground during Meghan Markle's speech. I could have been dreaming. I thought I saw a rat or a mouse scurry across her feet. It was that dire. It's that dire.
And the comparison to Catherine is not a frivolous one. In the same period, the Princess of Wales was travelling in Italy, and the scenes that greeted her were extraordinary. Streets lined with people, genuine warmth, crowds pressing forward, calling out, reaching for her. The sort of reception that money cannot buy and PR cannot manufacture. The reception that comes when a person has spent years giving of themselves genuinely, consistently, and without personal calculation. Catherine in Italy looked like royalty. Meghan in Geneva looked like someone who had perhaps misread the room rather badly. And here is the question that sits at the heart of all of this. If Meghan Markle genuinely cares about online child safety, and perhaps she does, on some level, why is she the wrong messenger? Why do the crowds not come? Why does the public not respond? The answer, as we shall explore tonight, lies not in the cause she was championing, but in the profound and growing disconnect between the person championing it and the life that person actually leads. You simply cannot lecture the world about protecting children online while simultaneously posting your own children on social media for engagement and commercial benefit. You cannot do both, and yet that is precisely what Meghan Markle continues to attempt. Let us talk about the speech itself. Meghan Markle stood before the gathered few in Geneva and spoke about the dangers of social media for children. She spoke about the devastation that online bullying can cause. She spoke about the need for platforms to take responsibility, for governments to act, for society to do better by its youngest and most vulnerable members. These are, on paper, entirely correct things to say. Nobody serious disagrees with them. The cause of protecting children from the worst excesses of the internet is one that unites people across every political and cultural divide. And yet, And yet there is a rather glaring problem with Meghan Markle as the ambassador for this particular message. Because in the very same week that she was standing in Geneva talking about protecting children from social media, photographs were appearing on her own Instagram account of her daughter Lilibet, who turned 5 just days after this video is being written, and her son Archie, who is 7 years old. Not photographs that showed their faces, not photographs that showed their personalities, their joy, their individuality. Photographs taken from behind. Children posed on floors, in closets, captured in ways that managed to be simultaneously public and oddly dehumanizing. The photograph of Lilibet that circulated most widely showed the little girl sitting on what appeared to be a floor in a wardrobe or closet area, wearing a designer ensemble, positioned in a way that allowed Meghan's Giorgio Armani coat to be prominently visible in the frame. This was, the caption made clear, taken just before Meghan departed for Geneva to speak about protecting children from social media. Let that sit for a moment. The woman flying to Switzerland to champion online child safety stopped on her way out of the door to photograph her 4-year-old daughter and post the image to her millions of followers.
She posted this weird picture getting ready to leave for the event on cyberbullying, and the whole event was about protecting your kids from social media. And I guess she doesn't see the hypocrisy that she's posting her kid on social media on a dirty floor in a closet. She's trying to show off that she has this Giorgio Armani coat. She's trying to show off her designer clothes.
The audacity of it is frankly breathtaking, and the public noticed, because when you position yourself as a crusader for children's safety online, and then you use your children's images to generate social media engagement in the very moments surrounding that crusade, you have not just undermined your message, you have demolished it. You have told the world, in the clearest possible terms, that this is not about the children, this is about you. This is about maintaining relevance, generating clicks, reminding the world that Meghan Markle still exists and still has something worth looking at. And what makes it worse, considerably worse, is the persistent strangeness of the children's photographs themselves. Royal watchers and casual observers alike have noted over many months now that the images of Archie and Lilibet that Meghan shares are almost always taken from behind. Their faces are never visible. Their expressions are never seen. They are reduced in their mother's own social media presence to props, to silhouettes, to figures whose primary purpose in the frame appears to be the demonstration of a lifestyle, the coat, the aesthetic, the carefully curated Montecito existence, rather than the celebration of actual children.
It didn't look like anyone was there, like, at all. A fan of Meghan's even said she went and greeted everyone who came to watch, which was like 10 people. In a serious international city like Geneva, this flop lays bare how people care about Meghan and her nonsense, which is undermined by her decision to exploit her own children on social media for likes and engagement.
10 people in Geneva, in one of the most cosmopolitan, internationally connected cities in Europe. 10 people came to see Meghan Markle speak about child online safety. And rather than pausing to ask why, rather than sitting quietly with the discomfort of that number, and perhaps reconsidering the approach, what we got in the days that followed was more photographs of the children, more carefully positioned images, more faceless silhouettes, as if the answer to public indifference is simply to post the children more frequently and hope that the engagement lifts. But why does Meghan do this? What is actually driving the decision to post her children's images in this particular way, at this particular volume, at this particular moment in her career? There are a number of theories, and none of them are especially flattering. The most charitable is that Meghan simply does not see the contradiction that she genuinely believes she is protecting her children by withholding their faces, while simultaneously building her brand on the backs of their existence. That she has convinced herself these two things are compatible, because she needs them to be. The less charitable reading, and frankly, the one that the evidence more readily supports, is that Meghan Markle knows exactly what she is doing. She knows that photographs featuring her children generate more engagement than photographs of her alone. She knows that the mystery of the faceless children, the glimpses without resolution, keeps people clicking and commenting and returning. She knows that in a world where her own star has dimmed considerably, Archie and Lilibet still carry a certain fascination, a fascination rooted entirely in the royal titles and royal heritage that Meghan and Harry chose to walk away from, and yet continue to trade upon at every available opportunity.
As her clout dwindled, as people lost interest in what she and Harry had going on, she was going to move to the next generation. That was the final card she had to play, Archie and Lilibet.
The final card. That is what Archie and Lilibet have become in Meghan's arsenal. Not children to be protected, not individuals to be nurtured away from the glare, but a final card to be played when all the other cards have failed. The lifestyle brand, the podcast, the cooking show, the humanitarian persona, all of it has failed to deliver the cultural relevance Meghan craves, and so she reaches for the children. 7-year-old Archie and 4-year-old Lilibet, who have no say in any of this, who cannot consent to being used in this way, and who one day will grow up and open Google and discover exactly what their childhoods were spent funding. Now let us bring in the voices that have been watching all of this most closely and most carefully. Because the response to the Geneva trip and the children photographs has not been confined to social media commentary or tabloid point scoring, the people who have spent years studying Meghan Markle, who have read her carefully, who have documented her behaviour, who have tracked the gap between what she says and what she does, have been remarkably consistent in their assessment of what we are witnessing right now. Tom Bower, the celebrated biographer whose forensic examination of the Sussexes remains the most rigorous and comprehensive account of their behaviour ever committed to print, has written and spoken at length about what he calls the fundamental architecture of Meghan's approach to public life. He has described a woman who is extraordinarily skilled at identifying what she wants and moving towards it, and extraordinarily blind to the casualties that accumulate in her wake. And the children, in Bower's analysis, fit perfectly into that pattern. They are not loved less for being used, but they are being used. And the specific question of whether Meghan uses her children strategically is one that has exercised a great many serious observers. Hugo Vickers, one of the most respected royal historians in Britain, has spoken about the lengths to which the late Queen went to protect herself from being photographed by Harry and Meghan during their visits, reportedly ensuring that a lady-in-waiting was always present specifically to prevent the kind of image capture that might later be deployed for commercial or publicity purposes. That the Queen felt it necessary to take such precautions tells you something rather profound about the level of trust that had broken down long before the Sussexes departed for California.
She's using their name and likeness and royal titles to sell a candle, and they're not even old enough to consent to being used in that way.
Consent, that is the word that matters here. Archie is 7, Lilibet is 4. They cannot consent to having their images posted to millions of followers. They cannot consent to their names being attached to commercial products. They cannot consent to the use of their royal titles, titles that belong, by birthright, to the institution their parents chose to abandon as marketing tools. And yet here we are. Here is the candle named after them. Here are the photographs taken from behind. Here are the children, deployed with increasing frequency as Meghan's own brand equity continues its steady decline. What is particularly striking is the specific criticism that has emerged around the hypocrisy of the Geneva trip in relation to Meghan's children's social media presence. This is not a niche complaint from niche corners of the internet. This is a mainstream observation that has cut through in a way that Meghan's communications team must be finding deeply uncomfortable. When the person speaking at your child online safety event is simultaneously posting her children online for commercial benefit, the story stops being about the cause and starts being about the contradiction. And Meghan has never, in all her years in public life, found a satisfactory answer to that kind of contradiction. The reason the Geneva humiliation landed so hard is not simply that it happened. It is that it happened in a context of accumulating failure that is now impossible to ignore. This is a woman who has tried, repeatedly, to reinvent herself as a serious global figure, and who has been met repeatedly with the same verdict. The podcast was meant to establish her as an intellectual voice. It did not. The cooking show was meant to establish her as a warm, relatable lifestyle presence. It did not. The As Ever brand launch was meant to establish her as a serious entrepreneur. The candle without a wick rather undermined that ambition. And now Geneva was meant to establish her as a credible humanitarian voice. It has not. The pattern here is not one of bad luck. It is not one of unfair press coverage, or British bias, or institutional hostility. It is one of a fundamental mismatch between the person Meghan Markle presents herself as being and the person she actually is. Because authenticity, real authenticity, not curated authenticity, is something that audiences feel rather than see. They cannot always articulate it, but they know when something is genuine, and they know when something is performance. And the public, across multiple countries and multiple platforms and multiple attempts, has consistently registered Meghan's performance as precisely that, a performance.
Meghan Markle just doesn't seem to understand that. If she's going to stand on this issue of internet safety, the first and foremost place that you must see this is on Meghan Markle's own Instagram page, which she refuses to do. She's trying to monetize everything, and it's impossible not to believe that Meghan Markle knows that posting her children generally gives her a bit more engagement.
And Brittany's point about Instagram is crucial, because it gets to something that the supporters of Meghan's Geneva mission entirely miss. If you genuinely believe that social media poses a serious risk to children, you do not post your own children on social media. Full stop. You do not reach for exceptions or qualifications. You lead by example. You make your Instagram the cleanest, most child-protective space in your sphere of influence, because that is what moral leadership requires. The fact that Meghan does precisely the opposite, posting the children with increased frequency, using their images to drive engagement, capitalizing on the fascination that their royal names generate, tells you everything you need to know about what this cause actually means to her. And the history of Meghan's relationship with authenticity goes back much further than Geneva. Tom Bower's exhaustive research documented staff members who left in distress, friends who felt discarded the moment they ceased to be useful, a father who found himself publicly humiliated after years of quiet support. Lady Colin Campbell, whose own deep connections within the royal family give her analysis particular weight, has consistently described a woman whose warmth towards others is conditional, switched on when it serves a purpose, and switched off with startling efficiency when it does not. That is the record. That is the pattern. And Geneva is simply its latest expression.
She seemed to be flying solo. I guess she left Prince Harry at home. He's probably so happy to have the house to himself. At least if she brought Prince Harry, I think some people would have shown up. If she had Prince Harry with her, I think a few people would have come, some girls would have come, and that would have been nice.
Harry was not in Geneva. That much is clear. And while the official explanation, if one was offered at all, would presumably be something about scheduling or prior commitments, the optics of a husband staying home while his wife jets to Switzerland to champion a humanitarian cause are worth examining. Because this is a couple who built their entire post-royal identity on the idea of a united front. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex, standing together, facing the world together, navigating their unconventional path together. That was the brand. The matching outfits, the coordinated interviews, the hand-holding on every red carpet. Together. And yet the solo appearances have been increasing. Meghan flies to New York. Meghan attends events alone. Meghan travels to Geneva without her husband. And Harry? Harry remains in Montecito. What does he do there? What does a 1-year-old former senior royal do with his days in a California mansion? While his wife circulates on the international stage and their joint brand continues to shed value at a pace that must be causing some anxiety, these are not idle questions. They are questions that people close to the couple, people who have watched this marriage with increasing unease, have been asking for some time. The picture that emerges of Harry in this period is, frankly, rather sad. Here is a man who was once one of the most beloved figures in the world, the charming, slightly roguish younger prince, the soldier, the Invictus founder, the man who could fill a stadium with genuine human warmth and make 1,000 veterans feel seen and honoured. That man seems very distant now. In his place is someone who appears to drift, who lends his name to projects that fail, who appears at events that generate diminishing returns, who is described by those who know him as increasingly isolated from the world that once defined him. And the dynamic between Harry and Meghan, the specific power dynamic within that marriage, is something that an increasing number of observers are willing to discuss openly. Lady Colin Campbell, who has sources within the royal family that few commentators can match, has described a marriage that those closest to the royal family view as deeply problematic. Not a partnership of equals moving forward together, but something more complicated, something in which one person appears to be driving the agenda with considerable force, and the other appears to be along for the ride, whether willingly or otherwise. So what is actually happening here? What is the strategy, if there is one? Because even accounting for the chaos and the inconsistency, and the remarkable capacity for self-sabotage that has characterized the Sussex operation since they left the royal family, there is buried underneath all of it a kind of logic. A desperate, scrambling, not quite coherent logic, but a logic nonetheless. Consider the sequence of events. The lifestyle brand underperforms, the cooking show disappoints, the public profile fades. And so Meghan reaches for the humanitarian cause, the one area of endeavour where it is genuinely difficult to attack someone, because the cause itself is irreproachable, even if the champion of it is not. And she chooses child online safety specifically. Why? Because it allows her to talk about children, because it gives her a platform to discuss the issue of children's exposure to social media, because it positions her, theoretically, as a protector of children even as she posts her own children on social media for commercial gain.
She is fully aware of how people discuss and talk about her children. And if she's so concerned with their safety, so concerned with protecting them, why doesn't she just simply not post them at all? People dissect her children, they make all sorts of comments, and I would say some of them are rather inappropriate, but Meghan continues to feed it, and that is disgusting.
And then there is the custody angle, because here is something that the photographs of Archie and Lilibet taken from behind, faceless, posted with increasing frequency might also represent. The building of a case, the documentation, in real time, of a present and engaged mother, the establishment, across thousands of Instagram followers, of a public record that says, I was there, I was with them. I was the one photographing them on school mornings and taking them to events and wrapping them in designer coats on their way out of the door. Whatever else is uncertain, whatever else is in dispute, this public record exists and cannot be unmade. Now, this is speculation. This is reading between the lines of behavior that may have a simpler explanation. But the fact that multiple observers, people who have followed this story closely and do not make such observations lightly, have raised the same question about the same photographs, suggests that the question is worth taking seriously. Because if the children photographs are partly about building a maternal public record, then the Geneva trip makes even more sense as part of the same strategy. Here is a woman who is publicly championing children's welfare. Here is a woman who is visibly, documentably, a devoted mother. Whatever the future holds, and the future of this marriage is something we shall return to, Meghan Markle is making very sure that her version of the story is the one that exists in the public domain.
When you are a royal, it is your connection to the crown that is what makes you shine in the international ecosphere. It's not necessarily you yourself, it's the crown that's the star. And when you leave that crown, a lot of its power and shine goes with you.
And we
Or
saw
goes
that.
back to the crown.
We saw that on the streets of Geneva.
The crown is the star. Read that again. Not Meghan, not Harry. The crown, the institution. The 1,000 years of history and tradition and public service that sit behind the titles that Meghan and Harry were given on their wedding day and have been trading upon ever since. The reception that greets Catherine in Italy is not a reception for Catherine the individual, though she is, by any measure, an extraordinarily impressive individual. It is a reception for what Catherine represents, for the continuity, for the service, for the decades of quiet, unglamorous, unself-conscious dedication to something larger than herself. And Meghan did not understand that, or perhaps more accurately, Meghan understood it perfectly and believed that the star quality she brought to the royal family was her own, not the institution's. She believed that the cameras were for her, that the crowds were for her, that the global attention was a product of her own magnetism and talent and presence. And so when she and Harry walked away, she believed she must have believed that the cameras and the crowds would follow. that the world would continue to be fascinated by Meghan Markle, because the world had always been fascinated by Meghan Markle. Geneva was the answer to that belief. 10 people in one of the great cities of Europe. For a woman who, when she was a working member of the royal family, could generate genuine public excitement simply by stepping out of a car. The comparison is not cruel, it is informative. It tells us something true and important about the nature of the attention that surrounded Meghan in her royal years, and about the fundamental error of judgment she made in believing that attention was hers to keep. And this is what critics are specifically calling out. Not the cause she championed in Geneva, that cause is real and important. Not the speech she gave, it was, by all accounts, competently delivered. What they are calling out is the lie at the centre of the enterprise. The lie that says Meghan Markle is a serious global voice whose presence commands respect independent of her royal connection. The streets of Geneva answered that claim as definitively as anything could. Now let us talk about the children themselves, not as a PR strategy, not as a marketing tool, but as actual children, 7-year-old Archie and 4-year-old Lilibet, who are growing up in an extraordinary situation that they did not choose and cannot fully comprehend. Because amidst all the analysis and the commentary and the strategic reading of their mother's Instagram posts, it is dangerously easy to lose sight of the fact that there are 2 small people at the centre of this story, and the decisions being made about their public presence, their image, their exposure, will have consequences for them that extend far beyond any particular brand launch or humanitarian speaking engagement. These are children who are, by any measure, in a remarkable position. They are 7th and 8th in line to the British throne. Their grandfather is the King of England. Their uncle is the Prince of Wales, the future king, whose own children, George, who is 12, Charlotte, who is 11, and Louis, who is 8, are growing up in the full light of public life, with their faces known to the world, their personalities glimpsed in carefully managed but genuine public moments, their futures mapped onto the institution they will one day serve. Archie and Lilibet, by contrast, are growing up in a Montecito compound, photographed from behind, their faces withheld from a public that knows their names but not their expressions. And the question that many observers are asking quietly, carefully, but with increasing urgency, is what those children will make of all this when they are old enough to understand it. When Archie is 18 and types his own name into a search engine for the first time, when Lilibet discovers the photographs her mother posted of her, the closet floor, the designer coat in frame, the face withheld, when they both come to understand the full scale of what was done in their names and what was decided on their behalf before they were old enough to have any say in it.
I think these kids are going to turn 18. They're going to go on Google, figure out their freaking royalty, and they're going to be pissed. If I found out my parents had been keeping me locked in the house, not telling me I'm a royal, I could have been over in the castle eating crumpets and scones with my cousins.
And it is not only the question of their royal heritage that these children will one day have to reckon with. It is the question of how their childhood was managed, monetized, and presented to the world. The candle named after them sold to the public under their names and their royal associations, without their knowledge or consent, because they are 4 and 7 years old, and consent is not a concept that applies to them in their mother's commercial calculations. The Instagram posts, the carefully staged photographs, all of it will be there, preserved in the digital record, waiting for the day when Archie and Lilibet are old enough to find it. The royal family, of course, says nothing. This is by design. This is, in fact, one of the most sophisticated and effective strategies available to the palace in dealing with the Sussexes, the strategy of dignified, impenetrable silence. No spokesperson issues a response to the Geneva trip. No aide whispers on background about the empty streets. No member of the royal family is seen to smirk or take satisfaction in the public humiliation of a woman they might privately feel has brought it on herself. The palace simply continues. The working royals continue their engagements. Catherine continues her extraordinary recovery and her graceful return to public life. William continues to build towards his future as king. And the Sussex story is left to tell itself. It is, when you think about it, an extraordinarily effective approach, because the royal family understands something that Meghan has never quite grasped, that reacting gives oxygen, that the moment you respond, you legitimize, that the surest way to elevate the Sussexes is to be seen to be fighting them, and the surest way to diminish them is to treat them as what they have chosen to become. private individuals living private lives in California, whose interventions in public discourse are no more or less significant than those of any other private individual. But behind the silence, there are real concerns. Concerns about the titles that Meghan continues to leverage: the Duchess of Sussex, the HRH she was specifically instructed not to use, the royal associations she wraps around everything, from jam to candles to humanitarian speeches. Concerns about the children and the line of succession, and the question of what it means for two young royals to be raised so entirely outside the institution to which they technically belong. And concerns, increasingly, about what the future holds not just for Harry and Meghan, but for the wider Sussex story that refuses, despite everyone's best efforts, to simply go away.
This is someone who just doesn't seem well. She seems to have sociopathic tendencies.
Yes.
You can see in her face she doesn't seem happy. She can't keep her story straight. She kind of weaves together these lies.
Now, those are strong words, and it is important to be precise about what is being observed and what is being claimed. What multiple observers across multiple platforms and perspectives have noted is not a clinical diagnosis. It is a behavioral pattern, a pattern of inconsistency, of stories that shift and change and cannot quite be reconciled with the documented record, of warmth that appears conditional and targeted, of causes that are championed publicly in direct contradiction to the private behavior they demand. That pattern is not in dispute. It is visible, documented, and consistent across years of public behavior. There is a broader warning embedded in the Geneva story that goes beyond Meghan specifically. It is a warning about authenticity and its absence, about what happens when a public figure builds their platform on a version of themselves that does not quite match the reality, and about the moment when the gap between the two becomes too wide to maintain. Because that gap always closes eventually. It always does. You cannot present one face to the world indefinitely while living a contradictory private life. Reality has a way of surfacing, and the manner in which it surfaces is rarely comfortable. For Meghan, the gap has been visible for some time. Those who worked with her in her royal years, the staff who left, the advisors who departed, the aides who found themselves unable to remain in the role have consistently described an experience that does not match the public image. Tom Bower's biography documented this in forensic detail. Hugo Vickers has alluded to it with the careful precision of someone who chooses every word deliberately. Lady Colin Campbell has stated it plainly. The picture that emerges is not of a woman who was wronged by the institution she joined. It is of a woman who arrived with a specific set of ambitions that the institution was never going to accommodate, and who has spent the years since its departure rewriting that reality into something rather different.
Meghan Markle, it was a pretty sad situation, but Meghan Markle hasn't caught on to the fact no one cares anymore. Why would the people in Geneva, Switzerland, on their weekend, on their days off from work, want to go hear you speak about bullying?
No one cares anymore. That is a brutal thing to say about anyone. But when you strip away the editorializing and look at what the evidence actually shows, the crowds that don't come, the television shows that don't find their audience, the brands that don't find their customers, the speeches that don't find their moment, the conclusion is difficult to avoid. Something has broken between Meghan Markle and the public. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily, over years, in a way that appears increasingly irreversible. And the warning in this, the broader warning, is about what happens when you mistake the crown for your own shine. When you believe that the attention was always for you personally, rather than for the institution you represented. When you walk away from that institution believing you are taking the star power with you, and discover instead that the star power was never yours to take. Catherine understood this instinctively. She understood that royalty is not a platform for individual ambition, but a calling for lifetime service. And the crowds in Italy reflected that understanding back to her. The empty streets of Geneva reflected Meghan's misunderstanding back to her. Where do Harry and Meghan stand with the royal family right now? The honest answer is nowhere good. The relationship between Harry and his father, the king, is one that those close to both men describe with a consistent vocabulary of sadness and distance and missed opportunity. The relationship between Harry and William is, by most accounts, essentially non-existent, a rift that has hardened over years of public attacks and private betrayals into something that feels very permanent indeed. And the relationship between Meghan and the institution she joined and left is one of mutual wariness, conducted at arm's length, through intermediaries and statements and the occasional legal filing. And yet Harry has spoken in various forums about his desire for reconciliation, about wanting to repair relationships, about the importance of family. These are sentiments that those who care about Harry receive with real sadness, because the actions that accompany them consistently undermine the words. Every Netflix documentary, every public statement, every Meghan Instagram post that leverages the royal connection is a step away from the reconciliation Harry claims to want. And the family he says he misses has noticed. William has noticed. The King has noticed. Lady Colin Campbell, whose understanding of the inner workings of the royal family is as deep as anyone outside it, has said that the family is no longer in close touch with Harry, that even those members who were once closer to him have pulled back, that the circle of contact has narrowed considerably, and that is a significant statement from someone who measures her words with care. It suggests that whatever slim thread of connection once remained has been stretched by the Geneva trips and the solo appearances and the ongoing brand activity and the children photographs to something close to breaking point.
She keeps stooping lower and lower and lower, selling outfits that she wore to go meet survivors at Bondi Beach. That was just really disgusting.
And then there is the Netflix war film. Because if the Geneva trip raised eyebrows, the announcement of a documentary, or rather a dramatic film about a British military operation in Afghanistan, has raised something considerably stronger. Harry and Meghan's production company, Archwell Productions, is developing a film based on a memoir about a British army unit under siege during the 2006 Battle of Musa Qala in Afghanistan. Harry's own military service is cited as bringing authenticity to the project, and that military service is real and should be honoured. But the question of how you go from a lifestyle brand to a cooking show to a Girl Scout documentary to an Afghanistan war film, all in the space of a few years, is one that even sympathetic observers are struggling to answer. Where is the through line? What is the brand? What is the coherent vision that connects the jam and the candles and the humanitarian speeches and the war film? The honest answer is that there isn't one. There is a desperate reaching for relevance, a willingness to attach the Sussex name to anything that might restore the profile that the Geneva streets so mercilessly measured. And the desperation of it, the frantic pivoting, the inability to commit to a lane and stay in it is itself part of the story. It tells you something about the state of the Sussex project right now. Something not entirely reassuring. Let us zoom out. Let us take the full view of what we have been discussing tonight: the Geneva trip, the children photographs, the Netflix announcement, the missing husband, the empty streets, and ask what it all means for the longer story of Harry and Meghan and the royal family, and the choices that were made, and the consequences that are now accumulating. What it means, at the most fundamental level, is this: the Sussex project is not working. It has not worked in any sustained or meaningful way since the couple left the royal family. The highs, the Netflix deal, the Spotify deal, the brief moments of public attention that surrounded Spare have all been followed by lows that progressively undercut them. And the trajectory, over the full arc of the years since Meghan and Harry departed for California, is unmistakably downward. Not catastrophically, not dramatically, but steadily, consistently, in a way that is beginning to feel structural rather than circumstantial. And the children photographs placed in this context take on a particular poignancy, because they represent, as much as anything else, a kind of acknowledgement of that trajectory, a reaching back towards the one thing that still generates genuine public interest in Meghan Markle. Not her brand, not her humanitarian work, not her Hollywood ambitions, but the fact that she is the mother of 2 royal children, the grandchildren of a king, who are growing up in California and whose faces the world has never properly seen. That mystery manufactured, maintained, and carefully deployed is the last genuine asset the Sussex brand possesses.
Let me read you this. So, People magazine reports that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are developing a Netflix war film based on the memoir No Way Out. Harry's own military experience in Afghanistan is expected to bring authenticity to the project. How do you go from a Girl Scout documentary last month to now Meghan Markle's doing a war documentary? It's just, where's the through line here?
Where is the through line? That question hangs over everything, and the answer that keeps emerging from the Geneva streets, from the faceless children on closet floors, from the absent husband and the wickless candles and the flop documentary and the Afghanistan war film, is that there is no through line. There is only the next thing. The next attempt to find the formula that works, to locate the version of Meghan Markle that the world will finally embrace on the terms she demands. And that search, for all its energy and desperation, is looking increasingly unlikely to find what it is looking for, because the world has already formed its view, not uniformly, not without dissent, but with a consistency that is hard to argue with. The world has seen Meghan speak about protecting children while posting her children for commercial gain. The world has seen her stand in Geneva before a crowd of 10 and call it global advocacy. The world has seen her attach her name to causes and brands and projects with the speed of someone trying to outrun a verdict that is catching up with her regardless. And the world, the broader public, the casual observer, the person who was neither a devoted fan nor a determined critic, but simply someone watching from a distance, that world has largely made up its mind. And so we come to the end of tonight's story. A story that began on the empty streets of Geneva and led us, through the children photographs and the absent husband and the Netflix war film and the pattern of desperate reinvention, to a question that I think many of you watching this already know the answer to, but that deserves to be asked plainly all the same. If Meghan Markle truly cares about protecting children from the harms of social media, if that cause is genuine, if that advocacy comes from a real place rather than a strategic one, then what would it cost her to simply stop posting her children? To remove Archie and Lilibet from her commercial content entirely? To let them have the private childhood she claims to want for them, rather than the curated, selective, faceless one they currently have? What would it cost her? And the fact that she does not do it, the fact that the photographs continue to appear, the names continue to be attached to products, the children continue to serve, the brand tells you more about this Geneva trip and everything that surrounds it than any speech she could ever give. I want to ask you something tonight, and I'd love to know what you think in the comments below. When you look at those photographs of Archie and Lilibet, always from behind, always faceless, always timed to a product launch or a public appearance, what do you see? Do you see a mother protecting her children's privacy? Or do you see something else entirely? And given everything that happened in Geneva, given those empty streets in one of the world's great cities, do you believe the public has now, finally, made its mind up about Meghan Markle for good? Those are the questions I'm sitting with tonight, and I suspect many of you are too. Thank you so much for being here. Genuinely, this community, the conversations we have, the thoughtfulness you bring to these stories, it means more than I can say. If tonight's video resonated with you, please do give it a like. It makes an enormous difference to how many people get to see this content. And if you're not already subscribed, please do consider it. We are here every single day with stories that the mainstream press doesn't always tell the way they deserve to be told. Share this one if you think someone else needs to hear it, and I will see you tomorrow.